We've got a lot of political headlines to talk about this morning. Joining me now to talk about it, Trump supporter, former Lieutenant Governor of New York, Betsy McCoy. Lieutenant Governor, good to have you this morning.
Glad to join you.
So the latest controversy came from Donald Trump last night, speaking about Hillary Clinton, the Second Amendment, and her Secret Service detail. Let's first listen to what he said, and then we'll talk about it.
I think that her bodyguards should drop all weapons. They should disarm. Right? I think they should disarm immediately. What do you think? Yes? Yes. Yeah. Take their guns away. She doesn't want guns. Let's see what happens to her.
Then he goes on to say it'll be very dangerous. Take the guns away. Let's see what happens to her. The Clinton campaign saying that this is to potential violence against a candidate. How do you receive what Donald Trump just said?
Well, I think he's making a very good point, and that is that Hillary Clinton has made herself an enemy of the Second Amendment. She's put a big bullseye on the Second Amendment. She's made it very clear that she wants to take people's gun rights away. And so it's very good
Hillary
for Donald
Clinton has not said or intended that she wants to, as Donald Trump says, take away the Second Amendment, take away their Second Amendment rights.
Excuse me, you are incorrect.
Okay, explain how I'm incorrect, and then I'll explain the facts.
She has proposed legislation that will whittle away at people's Second Amendment rights so that it's a mere words on paper. When you restrict Second Amendment rights so much that they're meaningless, especially in places like inner cities where people have no alternative but to protect themselves from the criminals who always get guns no matter what the law says.
Okay, so let's take this in two different bites here. First, you said that in inner cities, people should and I'm paraphrasing, correct me if I'm wrong, we can do this in real time, that the only way they can protect themselves is with these guns you're
that's correct,
discussing.
because the criminals always get the guns no matter what the law says.
Okay, in many of these major cities, Washington, D.C., Chicago, these are already cities in which there are no guns allowed to be sold because they are gun-free zones as it relates to sales specifically. So that law, as it's implemented locally, is already in place. As Donald
That's
Trump
right, but
has
let
said,
me just point out that, for example, in Chicago, which also has very strict gun rules, the fact is that violence in Chicago is notorious. Gun violence, the number of homicides, it's gone way up, 30% this year. Cincinnati, Los Angeles.
But you're
many
arguing...
of these cities have very strict gun regulations. So gun regulation, despite what Mrs. Clinton says, is not the answer.
But you're arguing two sides of the same coin. Before, in the beginning of this interview, said that this is the only way people can protect themselves, and now you've said that these are gun-free zones and it's not stopping anything.
Well, that's right. Obviously, people are unable to protect themselves. The criminals are getting the guns and shooting wildly in those cities.
All right, let's get back to Donald Trump and this claim that he's trying to, or Hillary Clinton is trying to do away with the Second Amendment or get rid of people's Second Amendment rights. Hillary Clinton has suggested not allowing people who are on a no-fly zone to buy weapons, gun controls, but not to get rid of the Second Amendment.
Of course, she hasn't specifically said get rid of the Second Amendment, but as I pointed out a moment earlier, when you so whittle away the Second Amendment by imposing restrictions that make it virtually impossible to have a gun with you, that is, for all intents and purposes, getting rid of the Second Amendment.
Okay, now let's talk about what Donald Trump said yesterday. Why is he referencing this disarming of Secret Service agents and then questioning, as he said, let's see what happens to her? Why is he saying that? Why make that reference?
He's pointing out Mrs. Clinton's well-known hypocrisy. What's good for her is not good for the rest of us. She wants the rest of America not to be protected by having their own guns, but she wants to make sure she is well protected.
Okay.
It's a matter of hypocrisy.
Well, you know, of course, that every presidential candidate within 120 days of the election, with some criteria, get Secret Service protection.
You're quite
right. That's been tradition. And
that's
the reason that it happened, because in 1968, RFK, Robert F. Kennedy, was shot and killed, and that's why they have it.
Well, and certainly no one would ever want that to happen to any candidate. But remember that Mrs. Clinton has had bodyguards and protection for her most of her recent adult life. because as a former First Lady, as a Secretary of State, she's quite accustomed to being protected by armed bodyguards, but the rest of us are not. And I feel for the families, especially in places like Chicago, Cincinnati, and Los Angeles, where gun violence is so high now, homicides have soared by double digits, and the very people who need a gun to protect themselves, they go to work early in the morning, they work in a small convenience store, they have some other kind of dangerous trip to work, and they can't carry a gun.
That's a fair point, but let's talk about, you brought up the term hypocrisy. Let's examine hypocrisy. Donald Trump says that Hillary Clinton's Secret Service should disarm because the rest of America doesn't have that protection. Donald Trump, back in May it was, when he first alluded to this disarming of Secret Service, said this in front of the NRA as he accepted their endorsement. He was saying that in front of a crowd that had been required to leave their guns outside of that room. If Donald Trump is so supportive of gun rights and a right to carry, then should he then allow people to bring guns to his events? Because the Secret Service doesn't allow that.
I'm not familiar with the rules for that particular event.
It's every event. The Secret Service does not allow people to bring guns into these closed spaces.
Well, it's a Secret Service rule. It's probably a good rule. But
which is also the reason that they carry guns at Clinton's events and at his.
The real issue here, and I'm glad he's raising it, is that one of the presidential candidates, Donald Trump, is raising the importance of protecting the Second Amendment. As you know, President Obama mocked Americans for clinging to their religion and their guns. Both of those rights are definitely under attack, and I'm glad that Donald Trump is standing up for our Second Amendment right.
We have just a couple of minutes left, and I want to turn to the controversy, I guess, of Friday, which was birtherism, and Donald Trump in 32 words saying that essentially President Obama was born in the United States, period, finishing that. I wonder, did the campaign or does the campaign believe that this 32-word treatment of a 5-year lie is enough, that it ends it?
It's probably overdoing it, because the real birther issue in this country...
You mean that the 32 words was too much?
Yeah. The real birther issue in this country is that under Barack Obama, business startups have failed. Fewer businesses have been born than have died. The business failure rate versus
How is that a birtherism issue?
Because an economy should be able to give birth to new businesses all the time.
I understand the term that you're using, but no, we're not going to shift away from the topic, because we can have an economic conversation.
To this extent, let me just point out, voters don't care about the birther issue.
Lieutenant Governor,
voters say the economy is the number one issue.
I hear what you're saying, but Donald Trump, for years, has pushed this lie, saying that President Obama was not born in the United States, and then he comes out and in 32 words blames it on Hillary Clinton, then says the president's born here, and he's finished it, which he didn't finish it.
I think he's quite right in everything he said.
Is that enough?
Yes, it is enough, and let me say this. The voters want you to talk about the economy. That's their number one concern. But the media elite are drowning Americans in one story after another about birtherism, because they don't want the American public to hear about Donald Trump's economic plan to promote real growth in this country, and Hillary Clinton's economic plan, which will drive us into a recession and lower wages. That contrast is so clear. Tax cuts and growth from Donald Trump, tax hikes and pay cuts from Hillary Clinton.
Economists coming up later this morning. We'll talk about those economic plans, including the child care proposals. But I will point out that Donald Trump was the one who incessantly talked about the president potentially being born outside of the U.S. and then with 32 words attempted to clean up 5 years.
Even Barack Obama said enough with the birther issue. That's what he said yesterday. Enough with this issue.
Well, he solved it the day he was born. Lieutenant Governor Betsy McCormick.